am so glad that you're here, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be with you guys tonight. This is actually week 4. If you didn't know, this is week 4 of a series of messages that we've been in talking about the phases or the stages that we all go through in life. And this week I get to talk to you about the adult phase of life. A couple weeks ago I was talking to my wife. I told her that's what I was going to be teaching on, and she said, "Are you sure you're qualified to talk about that?" But that's debatable, probably, But I'll just be honest with you. I have found that being an adult is probably a lot harder than most young people think that it is. I mean, if you're an adult and you're here, isn't that true? Just say yes if you believe that's true. Yeah, it's a lot harder. Like when you're young, you have all these hopes and dreams and all these expectations of what life will be like and what you will do and that kind of thing. But then when you actually get there, when you move out and you're on your own, honestly, oftentimes it's a lot harder than you anticipated. The road to those hopes and dreams that you had, sometimes, the way you envisioned it is not the way that it goes, and you get lost along the way. Anybody here besides me get lost along the way at times? You took a detour and you ended up someplace that you didn't really want to go. That happens. Getting lost is kind of a hopeless, helpless feeling too, isn't it? If you're new to an area, you haven't been in an area a long time, it's kind of easy to get lost. I mean, I remember my wife and I, we moved from California to the very eastern part of Tennessee, up in the Appalachian foothills, and we got lost a number of times. Because in California, if you've ever been, you know that everything is connected by freeways. It's pretty easy to get around because freeways take you where you want to go. But in Tennessee, there's like 12 ways to get anywhere. And it just depends on what your favorite. So we moved to Tennessee, and it was in 1995. So this is before Apple Maps or Google Maps or GPS or anything like that. Back then, you had a map or a road atlas. How many of you guys remember those? Right? Yeah, that's what we had. That's how it was. And so every time we would get lost in Tennessee, we were heading somewhere, we get lost, I'd drive around for a while, and finally my wife would convince me to pull over and ask for directions, and I hated that, but I would. And no matter where I stopped and no matter who I talked to in Tennessee, this is just the thing, invariably I'm asking for directions, and I'd say, "Hey, I'm a little bit lost. I'm trying to get to Jonesboro. Can you tell me how to get there?" And no matter who it was I was talking to, they would look right in my face and they would say, "You want to get there from here?" I'm thinking, "No, Einstein, tell me how to get there from your house." Yeah, this is where we are, right? So that would be very, very helpful. But it's true, if you're not familiar with an area, you can get lost. In fact, my wife and I, we're relatively new to this area, haven't been here that long, and we got lost last week. We were trying to get from Georgetown back to Batavia. We live in Batavia, and we were at Georgetown, and we even had our phones. We had our GPS device, and we still got lost. So we're headed back after one of our small groups, and we're using Apple Maps. And one of the things that happened is one of the roads got washed out, and apparently Siri didn't know about it. And so we had to take a detour. And every time I would go down a different road, it would keep trying to bring me back to that flooded road. And I'm getting more and more frustrated, and it's getting later and later. And so finally, I just drove north, what I thought was north. I think I'll just drive north until it stops telling me where to go. And so after a while, I actually asked Siri, "Siri, get me directions to Batavia." And it was so strange because Siri, the first time ever, Siri said, "From here?" It's just kind of crazy. But here's the thing about this. When you're going through life, if you were here a couple weeks ago, our senior pastor, Kenny, was talking about our DNA as a church. And one of the things he said, and I love the way he said it, he said that everybody who comes to the crossing has a story. And that is so true because our lives, if you notice, they unfold like a story. I mean, life doesn't come to us like a math problem or a logic quiz. Life comes to us a chapter at a time, a page at a time. And we might even say it comes in phases. You go through your life in certain stages. And tonight we're going to talk about the phase of adulthood. And adults, when you look back at your life, and we all do this, when you look back at your life, do you ever wonder to yourself, how did I end up here? Like, why did my life turn out this way? Why has it been like this? And where was God in all of this? As I'm going through all this stuff, where was God? And do you know exactly what you're supposed to do next in life? I mean, like exactly, with a settled confidence that if you do it, it'll work out right, that you'll get to where you wanted to go. Do you know that? Neither do I. I mean, I would love to wake up each morning knowing exactly who I am and who God has called me to be, and totally confident in all of my relationships and all the things that I'm involved in, and undaunted by life as it comes to me. And there have been these brief, rare, just kind of sparkling moments where I have felt like that. And they don't come often, but, I have that kind of clarity. But it's awesome when it happens. I mean, it's just so great to know you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. But for most of us, life sometimes feels like we're driving around with a very dirty windshield and the sun is shining right in your eyes and your wiper washer thing doesn't work. And so you're kind of looking ahead and, you're not exactly sure. I mean, I can kind of make out shapes and I think the light is green, but I really don't know because I can't tell. Wouldn't clarity from God, clarity in your life go a long way right about now? I think it would. Let's just start with this one question. Like, why is life so hard at times? You find out life is hard. Like you decide, you know what, I'm going to lose a little bit of weight, I'm going to get in shape, and then it never happens or it never lasts. You try to, you're thinking of shifting your career. You're thinking about doing something different or maybe saving some money, but you never quite get there. In your relationship, you try to recover something that maybe has been lost, and then your wife or husband looks at you like, nice try. And then it turns into a big fight, and it's actually worse than it was. I mean, yes, we have our faith, and even there, maybe even especially there, it all seems to fall short of what we anticipated, what we hoped to have. I mean, you come to church, and there's talk about freedom and abundant life and faith like a river, and being healed. And many of us, though, we don't really experience a lot of that in our lives. It's hard for that to come. And each week of this series, we've been talking about these phases and that each phase matters. And each phase is important to consider because, like I said, that's pretty much how life happens. That's how we experience it. We start out as infants, and then we grow through adolescence, and then those awkward teen years, and next thing you know it, we're young adults, and we're out on our own. Life happens like that. It unfolds like a story. You wake up, what's going to happen? You don't know exactly, right? It might be sunny outside like it was this morning. It might be raining. There might be a storm coming. You may get invited by your friends to go to dinner and a movie. You might lose your job. I mean, things happen like that. Life unfolds just like a story unfolds. And there's all kinds of characters and all kinds of settings, but a year goes by and it's like a chapter in your book. Your life tells a story. Sometimes it's tragedy. Sometimes it's comedy. Most often it's soap opera. But life is story. You're writing a story with your life, and I expect all of us at one time or another, in an attempt to understand our lives, we ask these questions about our life. We look back and we say, was I meant to take that particular job? Was I really meant to do that particular thing? Am I going to find somebody that I can spend my life with? And if I do, if I trust, will they be faithful? Will this path lead to the place I want to go? And what about the kids? Are they headed in the right direction? Did we spend enough time with them? Did we miss an opportunity in their lives when they're young and now maybe it's too late? Our youth pastor, Jai, talked about that a lot over the last couple of weeks. And as humans, we always have these lingering questions like, who am I? What am I here for? Is there a God? And if there is a God, what does he want from me? If life is a story, what's the plot? And what's your part to play? That'd be handy to know, wouldn't it? If you could just know ahead of time. Well, look, God knew that you would ask those questions. God knew that you'd be faced with those problems in your life, and God actually knew this was going to happen. And so he provided us some great advice concerning all of this stuff. For example, God tells us in the book of Proverbs is often called the book of wisdom because there's just so much wisdom in there. And it was written by a guy named Solomon. Solomon was called by God the wisest man who ever lived. And in chapter 22, verse 3, we see that he says this: a prudent person, a wise person, will see danger ahead. You know what? They'll take refuge. They'll change direction if they need to because they're looking ahead. But the simple, the foolish, you know what? They just keep going. And they will suffer for it. This is just so true, right? This is just awesome. And it's just kind of seems like common sense to know that one. Because in life, the direction that you're heading in leads to a certain destination. It's going to take you somewhere. The direction, and we know this when we get in our car, before we get lost. We know we're headed in the right direction. We think we are, and then we go hiking. We know that the direction that you're traveling in is going to take you to a specific place. Direction determines where you eventually will end up. But when it comes to our marriages, and when it comes to our finances, or the way that we handle our career, when it comes to all that stuff, somehow we forget that this applies, or we don't think that this applies in those arenas, but they do. Like I said, adulting, being an adult, it can be very difficult. And I'm sure most of us at some point, we think to ourselves, well, I want this kind of marriage. I want to have this kind of retirement. I want to be this kind of person in my life. That's who I want to be. And then we head down a road that's actually going in a totally different direction. And we're just kind of hoping that somehow we'll end up there. And then when we get to the destination that road actually led, and it's different from what we expected, we say things like, oh my gosh, how did this end up this way? Because I totally wanted to go here, but I ended up here. Well, what's wrong with this is that every path has a destination, and you got on the wrong path. And it took you where it went. Direction, not intention, determines your destination. Whatever road that you're on, the road that you're traveling down, that road actually determines where you're going to end up in life. And it sounds obvious, but this is really significant, so don't miss it, because you might get lost, right? You might need this. So whatever road that you're on, that road will take you to a specific place. Regardless of whether or not that was an intended destination or not, that's where that road leads. Meaning it's not enough to want to get somewhere. It's not enough to hope that this road will take you there. You actually have to choose the right road to get you to that destination. Now, my guess is nobody's sitting there writing down, taking notes, or thinking, oh my gosh, Robert, this is so great. I wish I would have known this a long time ago, because this is intuitive. We kind of know this. Instinctively, we have experienced enough, because we're adults, we've experienced enough in life that we know this to be true. But as obvious as this seems right now, and in the world of geography, when it comes to the other parts of our lives, like I said, whether it be our finances or our dating or relationship lives, the way that we raise our kids, our jobs, our careers, when it comes to all that stuff, we kind of forget that this is how it goes. Direction, not intention, will determine your destination. And this is true for all people at all places at all times. This is true for human beings. So if you were to load up your car, you load up all your shorts and all your bathing suits, and you got all your sunscreen all packed up, and then you go out here and you get on I-75 North, you won't go to Florida, will you? You know why? Because that road doesn't go there, right? You may have packed for Florida vacation. You may have already picked your hotel. It's got a big pool, and it's right next to the beach. It's got free breakfast and all of that. And perhaps you even told all your family and friends, you said, hey, we're going to Florida. It's going to be such a wonderful trip. We really, and you plan this whole thing out. You know exactly what you're going to do when you get there. You know how the day is going to go and all this stuff. And you even say a little prayer before you leave the driveway. God, thank you so much for this vacation. God, please help us to safely get to our trip in Florida. You can do all of that stuff, but if you go out and you get on I-75 North, you are not going to get there. You're not going to get to Florida. Why? Because that road doesn't go there. And we all know this, right? We know this to be true, but it's so interesting because while we know this in the world of driving, while we know that this is true, when it comes to the actual roads that we choose in life, we kind of forget this, or we don't think about it. Over and over, I've talked with people, been a minister for a good while now, and I talk to people and they're telling me how their marriage blew up, or how their finances crashed or burned, or how their kids won't even talk to them anymore. The relationship is so bad. And maybe you've had friends telling you these stories too, and they're very, very sad. And they're so brokenhearted. And they're telling you their story about the roads they've traveled and where they've ended up. And if you're paying attention and you're looking along the way, you'll kind of recognize where things started to go wrong. And in your mind, you might even think, well, what did you expect? Traveling down, considering the direction you were headed in, that just seems kind of obvious that you would end up there, because there's often this contrast between my hopes and dreams, which are over here, and the direction I'm going in, which is this way. And then the cold hard truth is we ended up right where that road led. And now you're so brokenhearted, maybe even angry at God. I've seen people get angry at God because of the paths that they've chosen. But look, it was bound to turn out that way. It just was. For some reason, we tend to think that our hopes and our dreams and even our prayers will somehow trump the directions that we head in life. The the fact is that won't happen. That's not how it works. I learned this a number of years ago, and because I did, I often pray, God, help me to see up front. Help me to see early, God, when I begin to head down the wrong path so I don't end up spending my days in my life headed in the wrong direction and losing time. Because as an adult, I understand that I only have so much time left. And we know that the decisions that we, as adults, we know the decisions we make today are going to determine the stories that we tell later in life. Like if I studied hard for a test all week and I take the test on Monday morning, I aced it. I didn't study for the test at all. I just blew it off, went out, had some pizza, went to the movie, and I failed the test on Monday. Is that surprising? Well, no, right? That's how that works. Those are the easy ones. The problem is that what you do in your 30s, and if you're older than that, 20s, what you do in your 20s really affects what's going to happen to you when you finally get into your 30s. The financial path that you choose when you're young is going to determine, how you retire, or if you even can retire. That's how it works. The path that you're on in raising your kids early on affects how your kids will turn out in the relationship that you will have with them. Jai talked a lot about this too. Unfortunately, we don't always know. A lot of times we don't know exactly where these paths go to, and you can't take it back. You can't take back your decision. You can't go back and undo those roads that you've traveled. So this is the point, choosing the right path up front is really, really important to how your life is going to turn out. And one of the problems is as human beings, we often think, I just don't have enough information. I'm going to Google this. If I can get some information, if I had all the information where all the roads led, then I can figure this out. But I have found that my stupid decisions, really the bad choices that I've made in life, weren't because I lacked information. It wasn't that I didn't know. Some of us, maybe we made a bad decision, we made an impulsive decision or something like that, and then somebody comes along 5 or 6 years later, and they say, if you would have done A, B, and C, that wouldn't have happened. That does happen. Sometimes we do lack information, and you go, wow, I wish somebody would have told me that a long time ago. But for the most part, we crash and burn on the path that we've chosen simply because we chose the wrong path. We decided to go down a long road. For example, how many of you guys have ever been to the doctor? The doctor says, you know what? You need to do this, this, and this, and they start telling you what you're supposed to do, and you're nodding politely and everything, you're listening to them, and then a week later, you're eating whatever you want, you're not working out, you're not watching anything, and your condition stays the same. Why? Well, the problem isn't that you didn't have the information. You had the information, you just chose to ignore it. You chose you chose a different path. Now, I told you all that because I want to show you this passage in Scripture, which is amazing. I know you've heard it, because if you come to church for a while, you've heard it, but it's amazing, and the wisdom that it gives us it can change your life. This guy that I was telling you about, Solomon, he was very wise, and he lived a long, long time ago, and he wrote 3 different books that you can find in the Bible. They're all in the Old Testament, because it was thousands of years ago. He wrote Proverbs, the book of wisdom. That's one of them, but he also wrote a book called Ecclesiastes, and if you read Ecclesiastes in your 20s, you're going to say, man, this guy Solomon is such a bummer. This is so depressing. This is awful. Why is this in the Bible? But then if you go back and you read it in your 40s, you'll go, wow, that's exactly how I feel. This guy Solomon's amazing. This is great. Solomon wrote that, but he also wrote another book called The Song of Solomon, and you probably shouldn't read that until you're married, or if you think the Bible's boring. And then you'll read it and you'll go, whoa, is that saying what I think it says? And yes, it is. This is the book that 14-year-olds would sneak into the temple at night to read. Okay, that's what this was. But the point is this: Solomon was one man, and he had all kinds of insight in all kinds of things like marriage and finances and relationships and choosing the right path. And the reason he had all this wisdom is because when Solomon became king, he was really, really young. If you don't know his story, he was really young, like 16 or 17, maybe 18. And his father, King David, had died. And so now he's going to be the next king, and he has to rule this nation. But like I said, he's very young, and one of his major roles is not only to lead the nation, but he was the guy who built the first temple in Israel. And so you can go there today. You go to Israel today, and you can see what remains of this temple. So this is a real place, and this is a real person. This is a real events that took place. And one night, God shows up and communicates to Solomon in a vision or in appearance or whatever. God shows up, and in 2 Chronicles, God appears to Solomon and says this. God says, Solomon, because I loved your father, I love you. And because I made promises to your father, I'm going to make a promise to you. And then God says something amazing. God says, Solomon, ask me for anything. Ask me for anything, and I will grant it for you. Now, imagine God coming to you at 17 or 18 and offering this deal to you. That'd be kind of crazy, right? I mean, that's kind of scary to think about. But God says to Solomon, just tell me what you want, and I'll give it to you. And then Solomon basically says, God, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm so young, and I have to rule this nation, and I have to make a lot of decisions about things I don't know anything about. So I'll tell you what I want. God, I want wisdom. God, I want discernment. I want understanding. I want to be able to make good judgments in situations. I want to make decisions that are way beyond my years so that I can rule this nation and rule it well. And here's what God says. This is crazy. God says this, Solomon, since this is your heart's desire to rule well, to have wisdom, this key right here. Since this is your heart's desire, and you have not asked me for wealth or possessions or fame or honor or the death of your enemies. That's kind of interesting, but that's how it worked then. And since you have not asked for a long life, but instead of all the things that I would have asked for at 17, God said to Solomon, I am so proud of you. I'm so pleased that you asked for wisdom and knowledge to govern these people well. Therefore, I'm going to grant you wisdom and knowledge. And as an added bonus, I'm also going to give you wealth and possessions and honor, such as no one has ever had and nobody will ever have. That's how happy I am. So God makes this promise to Solomon. And he says he's going to make him the wisest man. That's why he's called the wisest man who ever lived. And if you think all of this is made up, and you think, well, that's just a story or whatever, that's fine. But if you take the time to actually read the book of Proverbs, if you take the time to read Ecclesiastes, and you take the time to read Song of Solomon, and you consider that one person came up with all of this thousands and thousands of years ago, and you'll be overwhelmed at how relevant this stuff is to your life today, and you might just end up saying, wow, there must be something to this. Or maybe I should think about this. Now, the reason I told you all of that for today's discussion, the reason this is relevant is because if there was ever a guy who could say, God, thank you for the knowledge, thank you, God, for the wisdom, and all that. But now, because I have all this information, because I know these things, God, you've given me this insight, I'll take care of my life on my own. If anybody could ever say that, it would have been Solomon. Solomon could figure everything out, basically. But when Solomon addresses this question that we started with in the beginning, like how do we know what to do? How do we choose the right road to go on in life? How do we know what to do now up front so that later on our life is happy and it doesn't end up a big, huge train wreck? How do we make decisions financially or relationally? How do we make these wise decisions? When Solomon begins to answer this question, he could have said, well, you know what, I'll tell you what to do. Just read my books. Just gain wisdom from there, and if you do what I do and follow my life, and that would have been a big mistake. But, when Solomon answers this question, he could say, well, I'll tell you what I'll do, and you could read his books and do that. But he says this, and this is our key verse. Here's what when he's making a decision, this is what Solomon says. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. There's that phrase again, right? Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to God, and God will make your path straight. He says, in every area of your life, everything that there is, trust in the Lord. Don't lean on your information. Don't lean on your experience, but lean on God. Because the answer of which road do I choose in life, it doesn't come from more information. It doesn't come from more insight. It comes from God. This is what Solomon says. If anybody could have leaned on his own understanding and his own wisdom, it would have been Solomon. He could say, God and I had that conversation. I know how to live a wise life. I know what to do. I've got all the information I need. But instead, he said it actually begins with choosing to lean on God, to not lean on myself. Now, that means that you're going to place your hopes and your dreams and your trust, all your confidence in the person of who God is. This is where it starts. Not in choosing a direction, but choosing to honor God. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. And the flip side is don't lean on your own understanding. Solomon advises us, don't think about your own understanding or your own experience, because if you do that, you're going to get hurt. I mean, that's what it means. Instead, trust in the Lord with all your heart, with all your faith, with all your hope, and all your confidence, and God will lead you. God will support you. Our tendency, all of us, and we struggle with this every day, is our tendency is we see the world and we see problems in life based on how we've experienced the world. And that just makes sense. That's just how it works. Like if you're with a group of guys and they're standing around in the backyard and having a barbecue, you'll often hear guys, they'll say stuff like this, well, the way I'd handle that, or let me tell you what I think you should do, or the way we do it around here, right? And we'll just share our experience with you. We'll just tell you how it goes. Our tendency, mine as well, is to try to figure out life and try to figure out our paths based on our own experience. Now, that's not to say that year after year we shouldn't get wiser, we shouldn't get smarter. You know, we should do that. We should try to have a view of God that is bigger and fuller than it was last year. Of course it's that. But Solomon, he actually slices this pretty thin. He said when it really comes down to it, with all that you've learned and all that you've experienced in life, with all that you know and all that you've accumulated, even all of that, don't make the mistake of thinking you've figured everything out. Don't think you could choose on your own the right path. Don't be thinking I'm old enough, I'm wise enough, I'm careful enough, you know, I know how to do this. I'll lean on my own understanding. Because Solomon says, even with all of the wisdom and all of the knowledge that God has given me, I refuse to be propped up by my own understanding. I refuse to lean on when it comes to marriages, when it comes to finances or whatever, relationships. We're asked to not trust our experience, not just lean on our own experience, but to trust in God. And we tend to see life from our own perspective. And so that's why we often choose the wrong path. We may say, well, you know what, I've seen this 100 times and I know how this works. And you might even think, well, I know how to be a parent because I was a kid once, so I don't really have to go to God with that. I know what to do. But isn't that a little bit like saying, well, I had surgery once, I could be a surgeon, you know? That's not how it works. So how do I handle this stuff on my own? I can handle my own business. I'm a man. I can do this. We think that all of the time. We are tempted every single day to rely on our own understanding about relationships and about money, about everything. But the wisest man who ever lived said, don't do that. Don't go there. If you want to take a path and you want to end up a train wreck, just don't go to God. Just try to do it all on your own. But if you want to be blessed, if you want to have joy and peace, then you need to lean on God every single day. And we come to find out that ultimately direction doesn't start with a quest for which way do I go. Ultimately, it begins with submission to God in all areas of our life. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Meaning, God, I'm going to trust you with my finances. God, I'm going to trust you with my marriage, even though I've made a mess of it so far. God, I want you to know that I'm trusting you with all of my heart, and I'm not going to trust on my own experience. I'm not going to trust my own wisdom. I'm going to come to you, and I'm going to ask you to help choose the road that I'm going to take. In all of your ways, that's what he's talking about here. In your marriage ways, your entertainment ways, your financial ways, every way that there is, your Sunday ways and your not Sunday ways. It's not just your religious ways. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. That's why we need to learn to do this. We need to learn to lean on God and make him the center of everything that we do. I remember hearing quite often that people would say, and I get what they're saying, people would say, you know what, you need to make God first in your life. You need to make God first, but I really don't like linear thinking because I can put God first in my day. I could pray every morning, then I can go the rest of my day just however I want. So I think what Solomon is saying here, that's not how you actually connect with God, once a day at the beginning of the day. And the rest of the Bible doesn't talk about our relationship with God that way either. God really is supposed to be the center of everything that we do. Now, how do you do that? How do you lean not on your own understanding, but you lean and trust and rely on God? That's something you have to commit to do every single day. And I'll tell you, it gets easier over time. And here's the thing. The rest of your life, if you're an adult and you're in the adult phase, the rest of your life could be the best part of your life. It really can. It doesn't matter what's happened. And as you begin to do this, if you begin to trust God with every area of your life, you begin to discover a certain amount of peace and joy in your soul, and it will remind you of who God is, and then it just kind of goes from there, and it snowballs from there. So that when you have a decision to make throughout your day, you will remember not to lean on your own experience, not just lean on, what you understand, your own understanding, but rather you will lean on God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and all your might. And our direction and our focus every moment, every moment of every day, we're focusing on God and we're trusting him with the big things and little things, then he will make our life a story that's really worth telling. Our focus throughout the day is not just a direction. It's choosing to trust God, choosing to focus on God, thankful for the big things and the little things, trusting God with the big things and the little things. That is the stuff that will help us as we move through life. It'll help us make better decisions. With God, all things are possible. You've heard that verse, right? With God, all things are possible, regardless of what you've done in your past. I absolutely love this statement. With God, it's never too late to be who you might have been. I love that. That's kind of like one of my sayings in life. It doesn't matter who you are or what you've done in the past. And that's the truth. With God, all things are possible. Let's pray together.